Hey everyone, welcome to another InStudio sessions. In this video, I'm going to go through an editing process from two of the images we did recently at a advanced lighting workshop that we did in person here. Got some fantastic images out of it, and there's two in particular I want to show you how I edit them start to finish using CaptureOne. So the whole idea behind this is to show you how powerful CaptureOne is and that you don't really need a lot of fancy software to get great looking images. So what we're going to do is I'll show you, we're going to create that image, and that image are the two images that we are going to edit. So if you can have a look on the screen, basically we are going to turn this into this. And then we are going to turn this into this. So this tutorial will be run as a follow-along tutorial. I will have, as always, in the description below a link to the ColorChecker photo as well as the raw DNG files of these two images. So you can download them, you can follow along with this video, or you can also play and experiment and create your own looks from that. So that's the idea for today. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is, this is our ColorChecker photo. Obviously this was a much larger photo. It's already been cropped. If you don't know how to use the ColorChecker or how to implement it into CaptureOne, there is a separate video on that, which I will also link in the description below. There's one video that explains what the ColorChecker is, why you should be using it, and what its purpose is. And I also have a separate video on how to use the ColorChecker to create a custom ICC profile within CaptureOne to make sure all the colors in your images are correct. So let's get started with this tutorial. So we've already covered the ColorChecker. This image will be available for you to download to create your own profile, just so you've got the exact same files that I have. But for now, we are going to start by editing this photo, and hopefully at the end, we have it looking like this. So the very first thing you can see is that this image has not been retouched in any way. This is all straight out of camera reset. So the first thing we are going to do is come to ICC profile, and we are going to go to other and go to advanced LX, which is our profile that we have created from this ColorChecker here, and we need to change the curve. Now I like working with film standard, but again, which curve you decide to use really depends on you, your images, and the final look that you're going for. I tend to use film standard as it works well for my style and the work that I do, but there are some images where I will use one of the different curves. So starting with this, let's get a bit of basic exposure repairs here done. So first thing we are going to do is we're going to tweak the white balance a little bit. I think it's a little bit on the warm side, so we'll sort of start it at around 5100 just to have a bit of a base. Exposure, as always, as I've mentioned in my other videos, I usually start with minus 0.2. Brightness will be around 20, just to get us started. That's obviously a little bit, it looks a little bit bright. But what I am going to do with the high dynamic range is actually pull the highlights down to around say 42-ish. And I am going to get the white point up a little bit to around there, and the black point down to around here, and that gets us started off a little bit. So that gives us the very basic exposure. Clarity, as always, I will add my standard clarity. Now, the reason I'm going all the way to 30 is because this image has been shot at 47 megapixels. So you need a little bit more clarity than you would if you're shooting at, say, 24 megapixels. So again, your results may vary, but if you are using my files, if you're following along, these settings work really well. What are we going to do next? Next, let's have a look at some levels. What we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of blacks in there by moving our black slider down a little. Bring up the highlights with a... Where are we going to take this? Basically, I'm going to take this pretty much where the histogram finishes, just so we have the full dynamic range of this image. Just got to make sure, obviously, if we clip, we start losing detail in the skin, which we definitely don't want. So just make sure we're not really clipping anything. And then I'm just going to tweak that just a little bit, just to give us a bit of a nice starting point. Now, for this particular image, I will do a little vignette. Usually with my vignettes, it's either -0.5 or 0. Sometimes I'll go to as far as -1. The beauty with CaptureOne, if you have a look at these, the way vignette works is we can actually darken it. Like that's almost at -2 now, but you're not getting that obvious ring of that vignette ring that's typical with high vignettes. It's just the gradation from where the vignette starts is really soft. Obviously the corners are way too dark here. The -0.5 just gives us a bit of a nice look to it, and if you see the before and after, it just brings a bit of focus onto Addy, onto our model, from the colorful background. So that's where we're going to start off. So let's start. Next we're going to work on some skin. So as always, we're going to do a skin adjustment layer. First thing I am going to do, M for mask, B for brush. We are going to make this brush a little bit bigger, and we are just going to paint in skin. So everywhere. Now, again, as I've always mentioned in my other videos, using a nice soft brush, you don't have to be super accurate. Well, you have to be accurate, but you don't have to be. It's not a perfect cutout, because the blending option does absolute wonders. Square bracket to make that a bit smaller, just to color that in there. I'm going to bring that in. And again, I'm going to go a little bit faster than I normally would just for this video, just for sake of time. But obviously, take your time with it when you're masking this yourself. The other thing I want to show you, which is a really cool feature here, is say we're masking all these areas, right? As long as you're creating the mask like I've done here, where it's a closed loop, I guess is the best way to do it. Best way to explain it. So the bits that are sort of just on their own will remain as on their own. But when you've got details like that, just to speed things up, we can actually bring all these masks in like that. We'll bring this down. I'm going to fix that in a sec. And then finally we bring this hand in. And then I'm going to show you a really cool trick to speed up your masking process, just so you're not spending ages on these masks. So let's say we have that. We'll just use the erase tool. So E for erase, just to clean up that little bit there and that little bit there. And now that we've got these outlines, if you actually come down to your skin layer, you right click and you click fill mask. Well, what it will actually do is it actually fills in all the areas that you've had closed. So if there's anything like lines and all that, it ignores it. But if there's like a shape that's been completely closed up, it will actually fill in the center of it. So it saves you quite a lot of time with masking, just doing it that way as well. And I use this quite a lot with when I'm working with masks and backgrounds especially. So we are going to just mask this out, and then we'll start work on some. Cool. M for mask to turn mask off. So what are we going to do with the skin? The first thing we're going to do is come to your color tab. We're going to go to the color editor and the skin tone option. Click your color picker, and we are going to pick a skin tone. Let's go with this skin tone there. And what I'm going to do here, so this basically is the area of the selection that we have, and then it does do a little bit of a blend. I'm actually going to open this up so that it covers the entire color range. Again, as you would have seen in my other videos, we have, for the color editor, we have the amount, which affects the entire selection. And then we also have uniformity, which evens out the selection that we have. So let's start off by fixing the hue a little, bring it down to around there. We are going to desaturate that a little bit, just because it works really, it blends. If you do a bit of desaturation on this image, I think it works really well with the colors in the back. And I am going to lighten the skin just a bit to about there. And then with our uniformity, I am going to change the hue to around there. Saturation, so remember, this doesn't add saturation, it evens out the saturation. I'm going to put it around there, and the lightness, just bring out the shadows a little bit, sort of probably around there. So what this has done, if we do a before and after, is we've gone from, see how I don't know if you can see on your screen, but the skin has a very orangey look to it, whereas that, I know this has washed it out quite a lot, but what it's done is it's fixed a lot of the color to it. So as far as the fact that it's been washed out, what we can do is we can come back to our exposure tab. We're still in the skin layer, we're still masked for the skin itself, and then what we can do here is we can bring down the white balance a little bit of the skin, which again just takes it out just a little bit. Might add just a smidge of color to sort of basically about there. And then what we are going to do is I'm going to bring the exposure up just a smidge. I am going to take the contrast out a little bit. So again, if we bring the contrast in, it obviously becomes very contrasty. I'm actually going to take the contrast out of this just to blend it out a little bit more. And again, this is just on the skin layer. And then I'm going to add just a bit of saturation back into it, just so we've got a bit of color back in her skin. And then, so if you want to see the before and after now, we've gone from that to that, which is a really nice look. And then what I'm going to do is bring down my... bring down the shadows a little bit to again just fill in those, bring in the cheekbones in a little bit more, and just bring up the white point on the skin just a little bit, so it gives it a bit more of a dynamic range and a bit of a nice look to it. So what we've done here is we've gone from a very flat looking image, so if you look at the skin, we're getting the nice contours on the cheekbones, and we're getting a lot of three-dimensionality to the actual image as well. So basically from here, what I am going to do is I'm going to with the levels, bring down those shadows just a little bit more. So again, looking at the cheekbones there, and just the just how that brings a bit of extra and then we'll pull the mids out just a little bit. So now with the levels, what we've done is we've just added a bit more punch and a bit more contrast to the skin, but the colors are really nice now, and the skin's nice nice and even for us. And then what you could also do, if you want just a little bit more contrast in the skin, is just do a bit of a S-curve like that. You don't need to do a lot. Just a smidge just there. So again, very subtle, but it just gives just gives a bit, brings a bit more punch back into the photo. So that is our skin pretty much done. So the next thing I want to do is I want to have a look at this background. So we've got these beautiful teal and blues, but I think we can do little bit better with that. So let's add another adjustment layer. We'll call this BG for background. Now again, we're going to use B for brush. We're going to open up the brush. M for mask, so the mask is showing. And again, what I'm going to do here is I just want to mask out that background. That's a bit big, so it's getting our skin a bit too much. But what I'm going to do with this is the same trick I showed you earlier, where we're just going to mask, basically just going to draw the outlines, and then we'll use the fill mask to bring that in. So again, I'm going fairly quickly here. You obviously, if you're doing this as an actual job, you'd be doing this a bit more slowly. And again, for the pictures I've shown you that are already done, I did take my time a little bit more with it. But what I'll do for here is, so I'll go fairly quickly, bit rough, but this is just to show you what is actually happening in the image. Give it the brush, color that, going to go around here. Now obviously with the hair we want to, we're going to get a little bit of the hair, but obviously we don't want too much. We don't want it to be affected too much by the adjustments we're about to do. But we do want to get fairly close to it there. And then finally this corner here. Okay. So we'll fill that in there, erase tool, and just take that off the dress just a smidge. There we go. Now using a smaller brush, we'll just fill in some of this. Now again, in this bit it's quite rough because we've got a lot of hair flowing through here, but what you'll find is that it doesn't really affect the hair all that much with what we're going to do. Excellent. So we'll just leave it at that for now. Again, right click, fill mask, and it does the filling. Just bring the brush, make that a bit smaller. Let's paint in this little bit of the background there as well. All right. So now that we have that, obviously we could fill in these little bits, and you probably should, but let's see how we can make this work. So from here, all I am going to do is reduce the contrast on the background, and you can see how when the contrast is reduced, just how much it evens out. So we are literally going -50. So what that does is, if you look at the before and after, we've got that heavy vignette look, and that just sort of really nicely evened out our background for us. The other thing I am going to do is with the black point, is I'm just going to bring it down a little just to darken up the, wrong one. There we go. So you can see down here, especially where it is fading out, we've just added a bit more of that black and that dynamic to it. But do you see how even when we painted here, the hair itself looks quite natural? So this is what I was saying, like you don't have to be super accurate because these tools are so subtle and so soft. You have to be fairly accurate, but you don't have to be 100% cutting it out like, you know, with like a pen tool or anything like that. And again, if we've had this little section filled in, that would blend. Actually, let me just do that quickly now, just because that will bother me later. So make that nice and small. M for mask. So just paint that in there. Paint that bit in there. And then using the erase tool, we're just going to take that off the skin and take that off there. Brilliant. And that works really, really nicely for us. Next, we're going to do the hair. Hair is pretty much a stock standard adjustment for me. With the hair, if we bring in the brush, normally hair is quite easy to paint in, but again, because it's all sort of wind blown with the wind machine we had in the studio, we've just got to do a bit more masking than we normally would. But again, we're just going nice and quick, nice and fast. Highlight all this in there, highlight this into here, and I will refine this a little bit, but then down here we're going to bring that down, take that up to there. Now we're going to make this brush a bit smaller, color in this hair, color in this bit of hair, and this bit of hair, and this bit of hair there. Bring that into there, bring that into there, bring that in with there, and then using the smaller brush we just bring these little bits and pieces in as well. Oops, sorry, my hand just slipped just then. Erase tool, let's clean that up just a little bit. There we go, leave that like that. Take that off the dress there, so we'll just clean that up like that. Do that, to zoom that in a little bit so I can see that a bit better. We'll just take this bit off, we'll take that off. I'll just leave it at that for now. Again, right click, fill mask, and it fills in all our hair really, really nicely. Now, what it actually did is it refilled this in just because it was actually closed there as a shape. So we just need to take this bit out. So you have to make it not touch if you want the fill to work properly. All right, so we're back to there. Just paint this little bit in. All right, so hair is masked out. What we're going to do with the hair is I boost the contrast as always. Addie's got black hair, so or dark hair, so adding contrast actually darkens it really nicely, especially with all the other adjustments that we did. So we're going to bring it to about here. I am going to bring the shadows up ever so slightly just to bring out those highlights a little bit. And then again with structure in the clarity tool, we are going to do let's do a 40. And again, if we zoom in on the hair, if you look at the before and after, it just adds all the texture of the hair back into it. It's really, really nice. And the final two things we are going to do is, one is eyes, and again you've seen eyes, and again you've seen me do this so many times now. This is literally a stock standard, so you can see how even though I've got really nice catch lights in the eyes, her eyes are quite dark, and we really want to bring the eyes out. So we'll bring in the mask out the eyes, this one and that one. You always want to make sure the eyes stand out. And then with the eyes, what we're going to do is we're going to bring up our contrast, although we can't see that right now. So let's bring up the brightness. Bring up the brightness to around there. Bring up the saturation as well. And because our eyes are so dark, we can push that a bit more. And now if we bring up the contrast as well. Now we don't want them too bright, obviously. Like you don't want to make them bright like that so that they're glowing. That will look really fake. But what we do want is just that hint of light there. So you can see, especially in this eye there, if we do a before and after, you can see that the eyes are popping out. They're still dark, they're still brown, but they're still sort of popping out to give them that sort of, you know, to bring attention to them. And again, we are going to add some structure to them just to sharpen them up a little. So again, if we zoom that in, if we zoom in into the eyes, that's the before, that's the after. So it gives them, I know that looks quite bright, but once you actually zoom out, it's not. If there is too bright, we can always turn it down a little bit there. And then finally the lips, which again, you've seen me do this before. Bring up the brush, zoom in on the mouth. Do we have the mask on? No, that's the mask on. We mask in the lips. Excellent. I just clean that up a little bit. So just like that. And again, with the lips, we are going to add some saturation. So the and I'm actually adding a lot of saturation here, just because the red looks really nice with the blue and the teal there. So we're just adding, you know, making those lips a bit redder, and then add a bit of structure to it as well. So if we zoom that out again, if we turn the lips on and off, hopefully you can see the difference there. We just add a bit of color to it. The eyes, you can see how the eyes pop out now, but they're still nice and dark and brown. The hair layer, we've just gone from a sort of bit of a washed out hair to giving it a bit more contrast and a better look to it. The background, we've just sort of evened it out and made the colors a bit prettier. And the skin, we went from that, which is, I'm sure you can see that sort of that orangey yellow color to it, and we've just sort of made a really nice looking, nice even looking skin tones. So that is pretty much our first image. Let's see how it compares to what I had originally. Very, very close. Very close. Skin tones are just a little bit different, but again, when you're doing these, this is your own personal artistic feel. Editing and retouching at this level is all based on personal preference. So, you know, you might love the look that I've created, you might hate it, you know, you might have something completely different. There is no right or wrong. I'm just showing you the steps, but you can make the adjustments to suit your taste accordingly. So we've got this done. So what I want to do is I just very quickly show you this second image, which ended up looking like this. Again, it's going to be a very similar look, very similar edit process. The settings will be slightly different, and what I do with it is going to be slightly different, but the process of it will be exactly the same. So, but I do encourage you to, because we've gone from a colorful background. If you look here, we had this, you know, beautiful colorful background. We've gone for a more of a neutral gray, with a bit of a gradation and a very nice sort of that clean look. You know, the blue denim on the clean grey background. So this will be a bit of a different look, so I do encourage you just to stay on, but I'll go fairly quickly through it like I did with the first image. So the first thing we are going to do is, again, starting here, it's a brand new image. We're going to come back to our base characteristic. We're going to go to other, we're going to select our ICC profile, and we're going to start with a film standard look. And again, you can already see, if we go before and after, how much this has changed the overall look of the image. So starting on the background layer, the base layer, I am going to the gray background, I want that to be neutral gray and really clean, which this is not. So we are going to drop the white balance down to around, let's just round it off to 47, and the tint, we'll just put the tint at 0. There we go, and that gives us a nice sort of a clean look. The next is exposure. I'm sure it comes as no surprise. I'm starting with my -2 and 20. That actually going to drop that down to around 15 just to give it a nice look. The contrast, I'm going to drop the contrast down to around there, and then I'm going to leave saturation as is. Again, this is a very neutral looking image. The neutral gray in the background is very neutral. We've got the blue denim is quite light in color. I don't want to oversaturate it. If we add too much saturation to it, it really it can ruin this image as well. I mean, a little bit of saturation just really brings the blues out. You know what, we might add, let's add just that smidge of saturation there. I do like what it's done with the blue denim, so we'll actually leave it at that. Again, coming down to our high dynamic range settings, we are going to bring out the highlights just a little bit to about there. We're going to bring the shadows down just to give it, make it a bit more dynamic. So we'll go to around there, and then the white point and the black point, we are going to bring up the white point to sort of there, and then finally the black point will just drop it a little bit to there. And then so what that's done is our exposure has gone from that to that. Our high dynamic range has gone from that to that, which has put a bit more contrast and just a bit more, bit more mood and emotion into this photo. And then finally, we are going to add some structure to it, just to sort of give it a bit more of a sharpness. And then finally, levels. So with levels, again, I'm just going to be very, very careful here. Just that little bit of a black point, probably around there. With the white point, see how our image ends almost at the top. So we don't want to take too much out. We're just going to put it around there, just to bring in the dynamics and really make the whites white and the blacks black. So from here, we are going to add a skin layer. Just like before. B for brush. Let's zoom this in a bit because all the skin is in the top half. B for brush. M for mask. Make that brush a bit bigger. Again, we're just going to paint this in fairly quickly. And what we're basically looking for is just to highlight all the bits that have exposed skin on them. So we'll do that. We'll make that a bit smaller. Paint that in. Paint there. Just a little bit in there. Make that even smaller, and then put a little bit of a line in there and there. So remember, when we're using the skin retouch, the skin color tool, we are selecting the color of the skin. So because Addie's hair is so dark and it's a completely different color to the skin, it's okay if we highlight some of the hair, because when we do the color selection, it will make sure that the hair is not really getting affected. If you had a model that had blonde hair and fair skin, then you're getting much closer to get it to a very similar color, and then you have to be a bit more careful with that, because your skin tool will actually affect the colors on the hair as well. So let's just paint all this in, bring that up to there. We'll bring this bit of arm in as well. And the same thing here with the blue denim jacket, very different color to the skin. So we've got that painted in. That's the skin done. Right click, fill mask, and it just paints that everything in really nicely for us. Coming over to color, we're going to use a skin tone tool. Use your color picker, pick the right skin tones, which is about there. Again, let's open that up a little bit. And then with skin, we are going to take the hue down to about... So taking the hue down makes it a bit more magenta. Taking it up makes it green. And you hopefully can see the green there. So we're going to go to about there. I am going to take the saturation down again like I did with the other one. Just because of that, the look, the overall look and feel that I'm going for. You don't have to do that. That's just sort of the way I'm editing this. And then the lightness, we'll put it about there. And with uniformity, let's just smooth this out a little bit. So that we'll put that about there. Go to around there on saturation, and lightness around there. So what that's done, if I'll show you again before and after, is we've gone from a very, very dark and very sort of almost orange looking to a bit nice and a much nicer and smoother skin tones. Now I know again this looks very bright and washed out, but we are going to work on that shortly. So with the color editor done, we are going to come back to the exposure tabs. And then what we are going to do here is we are going to take the contrast down just a little bit. I am going to bring the brightness up ever so slightly. And I am going to take the saturation up to around there. So whereas, you know, before we took the saturation out a little bit just to smooth it out a little, here by adding it back in, you can see Addie's got a lot more color in her skin again. So again, you know, before and after with what we've just done, that's how we came out of the color correction, and then we've just added a bit of glow to her. Coming down to the HDR, we are going to take the white point. Now remember, we're only affecting the skin because the mask is on the skin only. So I am going to bring the white point down a little just so that it takes care of those highlights to about there. And I am going to push the black point just up ever so slightly. Sorry, I'm going to bring the shadows down. Oh, good. Bring the shadows down to around there, and then push the white point up just a little bit. So bringing the shadows down, it puts a bit more detail and contours into a skin as well. And then finally, just like the previous image, we'll just get a really slight sort of correction curve happening here. So that does all that does is just adds a bit more contrast to the skin without using the contrast slider. So that's our skin done, and basically that's where we started. This is where we are. So it's taken that orangey out, but it's given us a really nice sort of look to the skin. And as always, you know, you can actually bring the opacity down so you can actually blend the original. So we bring that down to 74-75%. You know, you can do a really nice blend between the two. Maybe if we bring that up to 85. So next we're going to do the hair. Hair again is really, really easy. Click on that, rename this to hair. B for brush. Zoom it in. This is going to be a bit easier to color in the hair because it's not so windswept like we had in the other image. So again, I'm just going to do the contours. The rough sort of contour of the hair, and hopefully you can see with just the speed that I'm going with just how great using CaptureOne is. Like it, you don't really need to spend a lot of time to get some great looking images. So we'll paint all this in. That little strand of hair in there. Let's zoom that in a bit more. Take that off the skin there. There we go. bring the brush in and just paint this strand in. All right. Again, if we right click, fill mask, it fills it up really nicely. With hair, as always, boost the contrast. You know what, 25 always see. For models with dark hair, but contrast of around 25 seems to work really well. If you have someone with blonde or a lighter colored hair, you have to play a bit more with the contrast, and sometimes you actually take the contrast out just to give it a really cool look. But with Addie here, because she has really dark hair, contrast of 25 works really well. And what I'm also going to do is just by just tweaking the shadow a little bit. If you have a look at just that highlight on the hair there, by adding the just a smidge of shadow in, it just makes that highlight just pop just a little bit. Gives it a really nice look, and obviously add a bit of structure to it just to give it some sharpness. So again, the hair, this is before, this is after. It just has a lot more dynamics to it, and just a lot more contrast as well. Next, we're going to do the eyes. Eyes is, as you know, a fairly quick. So mask on, we're going to paint in the eyes. Paint in this eye. Paint in this eye. So obviously you don't want to color in the whites, just the color. Mask off, and then with the eyes we are going to add what are we going to do? We're going to brighten them up, add some brightness, add a whole lot of saturation, and add some contrast. So again, with that, you've got to look at the whole image. Like if we look at the brightness, probably around there is nice. So we've got the catch lights, but we can also see the color in the eyes, which makes it really nice. Without it, they kind of just sort of disappear into darkness. And then I do this with eyes regardless of the lighting, regardless of the model. I always bring out those eyes just a little bit. And then finally, obviously, we're going to add some clarity to the eyes. So let's go with 30 again, and that gives us a really nice looking eyes. Finally, we are going to do one more layer. We're going to call this lips. Zoom in, brush, and mask on. We're just going to paint in, mask in, sorry, the lips, and we're going to do very similar adjustment to what we did in the previous image. So we paint that in, bring that into there, then using the erase tool we clean that up off there, and then we just clean off just a little bit off there. Okay, and then so with the lips, again, what we are going to do is just add some saturation, just to bring them out a little bit, and just some structure to sharpen them up. So again, with the lips, that's the before and that's the after. Very subtle. If we zoom that in, you can hopefully see a bit more. That's the after and that's the before. So it just gives them just that little bit of a sort of pop to them. So one thing I want to show you now is a brand new tool that I haven't actually used in any of my tutorials yet, and this is the spot healing tool that's found within CaptureOne. This tool has been evolving over time and over the many revisions that CaptureOne has, and it works brilliantly in the new version of CaptureOne. So I just want to show you really quickly a really super fast skin retouch using the spot healing brush within CaptureOne. So normally you would actually now, at this point, this image is done. So you would normally now be exporting this into Photoshop to do all your final retouching. But I just want to show you how good the healing tool is here. So if you, instead of clicking the plus, if you actually right click on this, you can actually create a new heal layer. And then it calls it heal layer. You can rename it to anything you like. And then if we zoom in on Addy's skin, you can just see a few little blemishes here and there. Pressing the Q button gives you the spot healing tool. Again, the square brackets, you go up and down just to make the size. You don't want it too big, but you don't want it too small. And then all we literally have to do is just click on the blemish, and CaptureOne figures out the best place to sample that from to actually take that out. So if we actually just go through and we click, now you can actually paint if it's a bigger image, a bigger area. But if we just sort of do that, let me just take that one out for a sec. So we'll get rid of that, and that, and that, and that. Now, if for whatever reason CaptureOne did get it completely wrong, you can actually move it and adjust it to the sample area to where you want it to come from. But I find that 9 times out of 10, even more, it does a really amazing job at it. So if we now go to V, you can see how well that skin's been retouched, and it took me 30 seconds, and it probably would have taken me a lot quicker. Sorry, it would have been a lot quicker for me if I wasn't talking here explaining it to you. But you just you click the spots, it does its own sampling, and it's done. So if we were to, if I zoom that out a little bit, I can show if we turn that layer off, that's before and that's after. Even if we zoom that in a little bit, that's before and that's after. It is such a great tool, and it's so quick to work with. So unless you're doing like a big, magazine, submission where everything needs to be perfectly retouched and everything needs to be perfectly done, the spot healing tool that you find within CaptureOne is incredible and amazing. So let's have a look now. If we zoom that out. Now, the final thing, so for me personally, I like my crops to be 8x10s. 8x10 is used to be when models had their print books, that they would use with modeling agencies. They were always done as an 8x10 print. So I do like the 8x10 crop. Obviously, straight out of our camera, especially a DSLR, it's a 2x3 crop. So the last thing I'm going to do is press C for the crop tool, change my ratio to a 4x5, which is an 8x10. And then all I'm going to do, there it is just crop that down to 8x10. And if we just, make sure we're leaving a little bit of headroom up there. Sometimes it doesn't work, but it does. In this case, it does. And that's that's basically our image done. So comparing that to what we started with, we've done pretty well. You can see the saturation that I've added to this one as opposed to that one. You can see this one's a lot more blue. I actually think this is a bit too blue. So if I go back to background, bring it down to maybe 5, bring it down to half that, and that's really nice. But that's basically it. So that image and that image we've just edited today. It took really no time at all. We did 2 images. They're great, with great results. So hopefully you've learned something. I'm going to leave, as I mentioned before, these 2 files as raw DNG files for you to download in the description below. I will also have the TIFF file of the ColorChecker in the description below, so you can create your own color profile. You can then import that into CaptureOne, and you can really do a step-by-step follow along, and hopefully learn how to use the software a bit more. So hopefully you found this informative. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up. Comment below with any questions. Let me know what else you want to see. Let me know what you don't want to see, what I'm spending too much time on. Let me know what I'm not spending enough time on. And hopefully I can keep bringing out these tutorials for you. And hopefully we can all keep learning together. So, and if you do end up downloading these pictures and doing your own edits, and you do end up tweaking the settings and actually, creating a different look, I would love to see your results as well. Like I said, there is no right or wrong. It's all a personal take on a lot of these images. So if you have, please share those images in the comments below as well. I'd love to see them. So thank you again, and see you at the next one.